Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 351 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to design a biter zoo, which we need to make tier 8 modules. Enjoy! Before working on biters, I would like to show one aspect of Pipe Visualizer, where if you do Control and H, you can switch to color by system or color by fluid, depending on what you're looking for. So color by fluid can be useful if you actually know the color of what you're looking for, where I think color by system makes a lot more sense just at a glance for where things go. So let's say you're looking for like nitrogen, you would look for blue, and you come down here and you see blue. Whereas color by system, it doesn't necessarily match the fluid, but the colors are more vibrant and easy to track where things go. So if we switch it to color by system and then walk up, it's kind of like gray and boring. I'm not terribly sure why it does that. But then we cycle it and then suddenly it's a lot cleaner. So you might have to play with it to figure out what works best. But it actually looks like the whole thing's starting again. And it's really cool. So like let's say we wanted to follow where synthesis gas goes. You can hover over the gas and press H and see all the machines. But it's also cool where you can do that also on the machine itself. So if you press H on this machine, it shows all of the things going in and out of this machine. So at a glance, it can kind of give you an idea of what contributes. And I can see there's extra pipes right there. Unfortunately, you still have to cycle it to see the difference. We're making 60 plastic a second. The machines seem to be holding up, and there was a nice buffer in the tanks. So they're going to have to go down, but since this is above 80% now, all of these aren't running, so they have to go below 80, which is giving priority to just the natural oil, which is what we would expect to see. So I think it's smoothed out. It seems to be working pretty well. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of point that out about Pipe Visualizer, and, well, that's a problem. We're out. So we're out of this, out of the ethylene, maxed out on residual gas. Well, I guess we can follow the pipe then, because it's maxed out on synthesis gas, which it really shouldn't be. Perhaps the system got too full. We might be able to still make it work just by having another storage tank just as a buffer for the residual gas here. So this is just a buffer, and the system hopefully should basically get rid of all of it. When you have a big complicated pipe system like this, you definitely can run into issues if you just use the pipes alone as a buffer. But a lot of time having tanks in the middle can help with flow, because it's not a perfectly balanced setup. It is balanced in the sense where no input resources need to go in, besides the ones we have calculated here. But it still fluctuates up and down on which machines are running, and it has to run for quite a while before it stabilizes. So having buffers in there can just help in that regard. Probably the big thing here is to make sure this oil and gas separator is working at mostly full power, because this is the input oil. So as long as it's handling all of the inputs and it's not backed up, it means the supporting components aren't overpowering them. I was placing this, I was looking for power wire, and I'm like, oh wait, there's substations everywhere. Okay, well, we're getting pretty close to having all the modules researched. Just need to remove these agricultural modules, but I'm gonna wait to do that until we actually have the tier 8 modules, because if we remove those, then we'll just have to kind of replace them on the machines that do have them. And that would be kind of annoying. Okay, we've got a lot of biter stuff we need to plan here. Basically, we gotta go through the life cycle of biters, because our end goal is to get to the big biter zoo and get raw crystals. And we get the smaller crystals from the smaller zoos, but those smaller crystals go into the egg experiments to make more biters. Now, when we have a queen, they will produce more biters, but is that going to be fully self-sufficient? Like, are we going to have a surplus of biters where we're going to have to chop them up into meat? Or are we going to be short on biters to where we have to put the raw crystal splinters in to make more eggs to make up for what the queens aren't growing? We are going to be using a lot of these modules, so it's fairly important that it's nice and balanced, but in the end here, We have the big biter zoo, and we need to figure out how many crystals we want. I think in the end, it's a 1-to-1 ratio for everything. We could just kind of guess here. That's 15 and 12, but it's probably about 15 or so is the original intent. Well, how many does that make? 16, and that makes 15. So I'm guessing it would probably be 15. But we're going to need a lot more of these modules than the previous one, because if you look at the recipe for modules here, every higher tier requires more boards than the previous one. So to make speed module 8s, we need 10 boards, 8 boards, and 6 boards. So we need 24 boards to go this distance. Whereas with this one, we need 3, 4, and 5. So we only needed 12 boards for that. And then on here, we only needed 3. So this setup's probably going to have to be bigger than the rest of them to be anywhere close to balanced. So let's just say 30 a second and hope this isn't insane. Well, numbers get big, but speed modules exist, so that's actually not that bad. Of course, we need meat and nutrient pulp in there, and we do have extra nutrient pulp in the factory, but that came from our Benefran, and this whole setup probably isn't really going to run anymore now that we're not really getting a lot of residuals from plastic via green algae. So we're probably going to need a farm solely for making food for these biters, but let's just follow the actual biters for now and worry about their food later. So you put in 30 and get 28.13 back. And these biters are supplied from biter eggs, which also requires more meat and nutrient pulp. And that requires a lot of machines, but speed modules. And then those eggs come from the queen and speed modules. So what this shows me, it's red as an output, but it's on the output, which says we will make more biter queens than are required. So as a result, I don't think we're going to have to do the entire life cycle of biter. But nonetheless, we do need this huge amount of meat though. If it came from puffers, how many would we need? 34 puffers a second. And what can our puffer setup do? Like all of it. That tells the story. Nowhere close. Well, we can look at our egg growing area here, and that kind of gives you an idea of the amount of puffers that we would hatch. It's clearly not enough, and yes, we could take some of the meat out of this because it is going to be meat positive because we have been sending it down here just to essentially get rid of it, but it's not going to be sufficient. And when you process the various biters, you do get crystal shards out of it. But if you look at the amount of meat, a big biter gives you 1 raw meat, a medium biter gives you 1, and a small gives you 1. So the best way of getting this meat is probably just growing the small biters. I'm just worried we're going to need so many modules for things. Although in the end I might be overreacting a bit, because there's not that many modules that go into spaceship parts. I mean, they do. And we're going to need a few parts, but the difficulty is building the rockets to launch these parts up. Not exactly sure how many we're going to need to make. It's going to be around like 50 or 100 of each of these, something like that. But the numbers aren't crazy. They get crazy with the faster than light drive, but we'd only need to build a few of those. So it looks like you don't have to go through all 3 stages. If you want the final stage, you can just do the final stage. But I'm guessing what this is an alternate way of getting to the end. And if you haven't built the infrastructure for fish and for puffers, then biters is like one long chain of processing that you can do that would give you all 3 of the crystal types necessary for modules. So if you waited until the end to actually make the modules, this would be a lot easier than doing all of this. Those are 2 independent and giant setups. And I don't think it's really worth tearing them down just to build biters instead, since we already have something that works. So let's just do the tier 3 with biters and see what we can do. So They're fairly self-sufficient. We'll have to throw the eggs in later, but we'll worry about that last. So we need the alien processed meat, which requires goo, and regular meat. And that last speed module does not make a difference, so we'll put an efficiency in there. Or should we try to reduce the pollution instead? Because that only reduces it by 1. Yeah, I'm thinking actually pollution modules are probably more important these days because we have nuclear power and we have plutonium in that, and it's even running right now, so I'm thinking saving energy actually isn't that important, but saving pollution is. And then we have alien goo, which really only comes from one place, alien bacteria. And in some ways it's kind of nice when that last speed module doesn't make a difference, because then you can put a pollution cleaning in there. We kind of have a choice between spores and adding acid, or just growing them with mush rodados. And growing them probably makes a lot more sense, because then we get fruits and pips, which then can be turned into nutrient pulp. And we have a couple choices here on the farm. We're not actually making pollution-producing modules, but we probably should, because you can see what it does to the pollution consumption. Just gets crazy. So in the beginning when we build this, we're not going to have these modules, but let's just pretend like we did. So whenever they're actually available, robots will deliver them. Because really, making 15 farms isn't that big a deal if it means it's going to suck up a huge amount of pollution. And actually, we should probably do this out here, because we need these seeds, which come from the dormant seeds, and it gives us an output of extra seeds, which we can grind away. Requires mud, requires fertilizer, but we're already making the fertilizer elsewhere, and the mud is fairly easy to do here. Alright, well, in doing that, we've created an output of fruits and pips. So we need to mush them away. We could turn them into a fermentation base, which then go into chemicals, but we're here for the nutrient pulp. So we just mush them down, and it shows we need an input because it's linking to the nutrient pulp. So let's link it there. Now it's linked, we're still short. We have all these pips now, which we could also mush down, but the extra could turn into vegetable oil, if we have any. Let's see. Well, we don't. We still have a little bit more that we're going to need. We're still going to need a bunch of mud, 9.44, but we kind of have a mud generator. And it's going to be roughly in the same area, not completely, but we're using this already for the puffer setup. So it's not that big a deal to use it again. And how much does all of this make? Probably a lot. 60 mud a second. So I think that will be enough. So we don't need to worry about the mud. We don't need to worry about the fertilizer, because we're making a fertilizer from chemicals right here. And we're not making much, but they also don't have any speed modules or anything in there. But nonetheless, we're actually making enough. So now we just need a little bit extra of the nutrient pulp from something. And that's so small, we might be able to just get it from other places. Well, the thing that gives us the most nutrient pulp for the input is actually beans. And we only need a single machine for this. And the great thing about those beans is that our Binifran farms create beans, and this whole setup is now going to be fairly dormant. And it looks like we're already delivering beans, so perhaps this was something we did in the past. Although I've been going through all these numbers, but we probably should have done meat first, because in order to grow the medium biters, we're also going to need to feed them food. Well, we're certainly going to get some meat from puffers, just as a result of them running. So some of it will come for free. And we could do Santa rays, but... And actually, out of all of the things that could make meat, Santa rays are the best. We would get 2 meat from a Santa ray. So, how much meat could we get from our farm here? Because I don't think there's any modules in any of this stuff. So we potentially could crank this up just for meat reasons. Well, it creates about 2 Santa rays a second, which would create 4 meat, and they require about 1 meat. So we could get a little bit of meat out of that, and we can get a little bit of meat out of our Factorian fish here. So that seems to be the limiting factor of this setup, is getting all of that meat. So I'm not sure what to do here as far as the meat, because I don't want to go through the effort of making a huge setup for meat when we can just pull meat away from the other setups. It's kind of hard to tell how much we're actually going to need, because the max tier of modules is going to require way more crystals than the other tiers, which means those other setups will not have to run at full blast anymore. Because if they're all making tier 8 modules, then the lower tier crystals will just not be needed in more quantities. Although doing this at 30 a second might cause issues, but if we did it at 15 instead, well, not only are the setups smaller, it means that the other two setups, which are also making 15 crystals a second, will not need to. That the tier 2 will only need to do like half that, and tier 1 will be almost nothing. So there'll be a lot of extra meat to go around. And then 15 a second is actually kind of a lot of resources still, even with the maximum tier of module. That's still going to make a module a second. So hopefully I don't regret it, but I don't want to go nuts with this, because this meat requirement seems to be pretty substantial. And all of the other setups do already have the butcheries necessary to chop meat up, so we'll just have to play it by ear. I don't believe we're making biter refugiums, so we should probably put those on the bus real quick. And that's going to require some interesting things. I don't know if we've been using reinforced blocks for anything yet. And stone walls. Well, that's going to be a direct insert. We do have the reinforced blocks. Actually, stone walls might exist. Yes, it does. Over here. That's actually not that far away. Since we don't need that many of these, let's just let the robots deliver them. It's an expensive building. But it's going. There we go. And just as an idea of where we're going to put it, I was thinking we would need this space over here for expanding puffers, but in fact it's probably best to just do the biters over there instead. Because the meat's going to be nearby, mud's going to be nearby, and a lot of the same infrastructure can be shared because we have farms already in the mud, and even like pickup and delivery points for beans. And that's such a big spot, I don't think we're going to need to worry about space. And these are all tier 2 modules, so if we needed a lot more production, we totally can get it. So yeah, somewhere right around there. Well, the final stage here is the biter zoo. And I guess we'll do 10 and 10. And it's going to be a little weird, because biters and their meat go in, and then biters and the crystals go out. And it's going to be basically maxing out our red belts. Let's just use a purple, so there's no limitations here. And then an output. And out of curiosity, can we get full coverage with a substation on each side? Oh, unfortunately no, they're not that big. And in setups like this, substations don't make much sense because it's just a straight line of machines, especially considering the pole in the middle will cover both sides, and it will reach these huge gaps. So power poles still have their uses, so that goes up there. And we could do nutrient pulp on either the inside or the outside. Why aren't we getting any more of these? The refugiums have stopped flowing. No bricks, really. That's just gotta be a belt. Oh, yeah, of course. There we go. It's a little annoying to do these pipes in the middle like this, but it's a lot more narrow. And you have to put undergrounds in here, but ultimately it's a lot better. So let's do crystals on the left, which means the biters will come to the right. And back in. Meanwhile, the meat is going to have to come from somewhere else. But we're going to slowly run out of biters, so we're going to need a buffer chest in here. Is stack going to be fast enough? Oh yes, plenty fast. They just run normally, but we need to have an input of the biters that are going to need to be replaced. And let's just say we want to have maybe a stack of them, but how big do they stack? 200? That's actually probably way too many. It can mostly produce them in real time, but sometimes you might get unlucky and just not get your 75% of your biter back a lot of times. And you can also get unlucky with the queens too, or even the eggs. So actually having a bigger buffer here of, let's say, the full stack actually makes a lot of sense. Nutrient pulp's going to need to come from somewhere, but these other setups also need the nutrient pulp, so we'll just keep it going. And we're going to need about 10 of these. We could put them side to side here. Let's see. Oh, look at that. All done with the module research. That didn't take too long. And we're getting closer and closer here. We really don't have much left to research. Like heat shielding for the rockets, the RTGs, which we can't do anything with, so there's no point in researching it. Same with the heat shielding, that's why I'm not bothering. Water chemistry, we can't do anything. Low density structure is the last thing, and we could have done some stuff with it, like crawler robots, the Spidertron, but I wasn't really going to build those things anyway, just the lab, so I think we're good. We're basically ready for gold science here. But we should make the modules first, just so those setups are smaller and more efficient. Plus, I am kind of still concerned about the pollution of the factory. It's actually not that bad, at least compared to what it was, but it can still be an issue here. Luckily, we're holding out, but I'm thinking that having better modules would definitely go a long way to clearing this pollution out, so we should pursue it. So to keep this straight, instead of doing like 2 by 2 and going down, I'm just going to do the 10 machines in a row. Let's see, it might actually be more square if we put the machines up like this instead. Meat and eggs go in and biters come out. Just have that go straight through. Can we get this in here properly? There we go, like that. And in fact, the way that this is going to work is going to be extremely similar to this. The only thing that's going to be different is the recipe. We need this to be the egg hatching. So this is going to produce 2 types of biters, the regular ones and the queens. And actually, these things can all just be yellows. I'm hoping these purple belts aren't too fast for these yellow inserters, because sometimes they can be. Well, I guess I can kind of give you an idea here. Where if you have an inserter and it's just picking up random stuff. It manages. It seems like it's very close to not being able to do it, but it can. I think this is when, like, trying to pick up from a corner can be quite an issue. It's just bad practice to pick up from corners in general. But luckily, I think it will work. But down here, this is not going to be fast enough for purple belts, so let's just not include them so it's not there to be potentially confusing. So to the left, go the big biters, and they just go and fill it up. And to the right, go the queens. The way we've been doing it is from above was the meat, so I guess we'll keep doing it because we need to do the same thing again. But now, we actually need to grow the eggs. It's basically the same thing again, where we have 2 solid inputs and 2 solid outputs. Just different recipe again. And I'll line it up at the top here. I don't think we need a bypass belt this time, but since the other one had the 3 spaces, let's just do that to make it look square. Now the belts are going to be going this way. So the meat's going to have to come from there. The fresh queens are going to come in here. And we're going to need a buffer because we may not be able to make enough of them. And that's going to come from somewhere. Because these numbers are a lot smaller, I don't know how many queens we're going to want to have, because having 200 queens seems like an awful lot. Let's say 20 queens. And that's going to come from the egg experiments to start this whole process up. And then the output is queens and eggs here. So if we go to the right and send the queens up here, they can just go back onto that belt. And the numbers are all quite small. And the eggs will go up there and into that setup. So that's pretty good. The only thing that needs to go in now is the meat and the nutrient pulp. The meat's going to come from elsewhere, but ultimately it's going to be in meat form when it arrives. So now it has to be turned into the alien processed meat, and I think all three of these do use the alien version. So we're going to have to go the long way around here. But ultimately it's in there now, with a starting point right here. And then the spores can just come in from that machine, which needs the bioprocessors, but they actually do a lot of work here. Let's actually do this further away and then figure out the perfect spot for it. Still want the two, and I don't think we actually make these, and I suppose I should put it in the mall. We are right here. I was just handcrafting them because we don't need very many of them, but probably should get out of that habit here. Since we are at the end of the game, everything should be automatic at this point. Okay, it's making them now. Let's plop a substation in here and see if we can make it work. So the input from the farms is there, and then we have the output, which is the 3 different types of items. 2 of them need to go through bioprocessors here. One of them needs 3, the other one needs 2. And are these available? Doesn't look like it. But it's going now, so they will be here shortly. Actually, we can put both of these like this and put the pipes in the middle. And then the remainder is just the few bacteria that we need. So it would be kind of like this. Put it in the middle somewhere so everything reaches. But we also need to add some beans in to make up for the pulp. Well, let's put it right here. Those will attempt to fill it all the way. But we have one more machine taking in the smallest amount of beans with a top-up valve in here. So that gets the nutrients taken care of now. So the last thing is the chain to put the farm in. And we're probably not making farms or seed extractors either. Guess we'll find out in a second. Let's make a block of farms. 1, 2, 3, 4. And nothing here. And farms are actually, I think, something that are kind of difficult to build. Yeah, because they require the swamp environment kit, which that has its own kind of mess of items. So first we'll want to make the regular farms, and then we need to make the kits, which require a lot of the same things that other machines will have, so we should probably just do that in the mall, and then direct insert them. Farm 1, then temperate kit, into temperate farm, desert kit, direct inserted into desert farm. All these things aren't in the right order. And then swamp kit, direct inserted into swamp farm. These specific farms are twice as fast than the generic farms are, so you probably should go through the effort of making the specific one that you need. And I see that our accumulators are at maximum. Is there a problem with the heat here? No. It's just we're kind of at a idle time. And when we are, the turbines do max out the accumulators, so we kind of actually need more than a terajoule. It's kind of crazy that perhaps we actually need 2 terajoules instead, because yeah, our power consumption is only 750 megawatts, only. So it's almost nothing right now, so that makes sense. As long as the heat doesn't max out, it's fine. And even if it kind of wastes a little plutonium, it's not the end of the world. But I'm guessing we're probably going to need to double up our accumulators again. And where are we going to put twice as many of these? I'm not sure. Next time plutonium runs, I need to remember to check to see. We don't actually have a warning if the reactors get over temp. That actually might help. So instead of going crazy, and since we're still waiting on the farms, how about let's do a high temp warning? I have so many warnings and sensors for Circuit HUD here, specifically for power, but there's a lot going on with our power setup here, so we really want to try to make it as accurate as possible. And all that stuff has basically lost its power because it's been unhooked for so long. And that makes sense, and there's going to be an empty area in the middle, and that's how it is. It's fine. So we are transmitting the uranium fuel cell here. So we kind of need to do the same thing. we need to look at the temperature. And hopefully it is being transmitted. It is. And let's say 990 is awfully close to maximum. That if we get that, we're going to need something. But it's going to have to be a different symbol. I don't want it to be too confusing for any viewer, so if I put like the reactor on there, they might think, oh, the reactor's running. So instead, how about let's just do the red signal. It'll just be a red square which says, look at me, and then we could figure out which reactor is over temperature by which one's also running. It probably won't ever matter for uranium because of the low fuel value, but nonetheless, let's get it done for these other ones as well. Whenever doing anything like this, it's always nice to kind of test the thing a little bit. So we'll just put that in there. This will be for the uranium-234, but it doesn't matter. And let's just say 1000 of temperature. And there we go. We're getting the red signal. So that warning will work. So if the reactors are running and we see that, it means one of them overheated, or at least the test reactor overheated, whatever's actually hooked up to the temperature sensor. Eventually, you're going to see an error on that reactor. You don't need to know all of them all of the time. Oh, Givolite's actually going down relatively quickly. It's just when it's running. I think YARM is more meant for consistent usage. So when you have something that's being drained really fast, like right here with our Givolite, because a train just came through, the warning comes up saying, you're about to run out. I don't even think we've scanned this a single time, so there's 2 more layers of Givolite under this. And it's more efficient to mine the ore on top than on bottom, so I won't prospect it for the better ore until there's a throughput problem. Are the farms here yet? Not yet. Well, alright, we made the basic farms. We're making the temperate kits. It made the temperate farm, and it's just the swamp farm's on the bottom. But the basic farm is available. So is the request just wrong? Yeah, looks like it. Let's get rid of this. Put it back in. Get rid of the temperate kit. Alright. It was just the wrong setting. But there's their farms. And they're going to ask for their modules because those modules don't exist yet. So fertilizer and mud, which let's say goes on that. And then the other thing it's going to need are the seeds. And this is going to very slowly generate seeds. But it needs to go through to the seed extractor. Is that something else that's not on our bus? Probably. And this is a good spot to put it in a chest. Let's try to keep this shape if possible, because we're almost done with all of the machines now. Because this would be here. Although we still need to have the output though. Nonetheless, we can line it up with the other machines, at least. I think it would be something like this. Because we would have an output belt, and then it would just kind of go up and in. Okay, let's put some substations in here. And it looks like just the one over here will be fine. Okay. Well, one disadvantage, though, is we're going to get flashing alerts until we actually put those pollutions in here. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to get rid of those requests for now and just hopefully we remember to put them in there. Okay. Yet again, one more machine. So let's do on the end. This time, it's a seed extractor. And it'll be down here in a second. But unfortunately, that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to test the zoo and start making crystals. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.